I used to think nothing truly shocked me anymore, until the morning I walked outside and found a woman in a bright pink blazer ice latte in one hand, clipboard in the other, directing a construction crew on my driveway like she owned it. Asphalt machines roared, gravel flew, and in 10 horrifying seconds I realized they weren't repairing anything. They were stealing 10 feet of my land. And the woman in pink, she didn't blink. Didn't apologize. She simply said, "The HOA approved this adjustment." We did not have an but that was only the beginning. Before all this madness, our neighborhood was the kind of quiet pocket where wind chimes and porch lights marked the rhythm of life. People borrowed tools. Kids biked freely. Dogs wandered from yard to yard without anyone clutching a clipboard or citing invisible rules. I'd lived there for 8 steady years, running my small landscaping business from the driveway everyone recognized as mine. The long gravel strip, the old shed, the truck with my logo, nothing fancy, but honest. Then the Hendersons arrived. They pulled in with matching luxury SUVs that looked allergic to dust. Movers unloaded pristine furniture while Patricia Henderson, though she introduced herself as a community standards liaison, marched across McGrask like she was conducting an inspection. No handshake, no smile, just a slow head tilt of disapproval. "So you're the one with the work truck," she said, as if diagnosing a public health problem. I told her I ran a landscaping company. Her expression tightened, like professionalism offended her aesthetic sensibilities. "That sort of equipment makes the street look industrial," she replied. Her husband, Richard, wandered around muttering about upgrades to restore neighborhood value, holding a level like he was measuring the curvature of the planet. Neither one seemed aware that we didn't have an HOA. Never had, but within a week, their energy spread like a fog. Anonymous notes appeared under doors criticizing wind chimes, porch lights, the angle of recycling bins. Everyone knew who wrote them, but no one wanted to confront her. Then came the cones, bright orange ones, set dead center in my driveway. I dragged them back. They reappeared the next day. I knocked on their door. Richard answered, all fake friendliness. "We're thinking the driveway between our homes should be shared," he explained, as though proposing a charitable donation. "It's not shared," I said. "It's my land. You have plenty." He shrugged. "And we entertain often." That was the moment I realized they didn't just misunderstand boundaries, they didn't believe in them. Over the next week, chalk lines appeared across my gravel, flags I didn't place. Clipboard sightings increased. "Karen, because yeah." She was unmistakably a Karen, walked around mumbling measurements in an intensity usually reserved for NASA engineers. Then one morning, a fake HOA violation was taped to my door. I marched over again. "This neighborhood doesn't have an HOA," I told her. She didn't blink. "We're in the process of forming one. It's long overdue." We, meaning her and Richard, apparently enough votes for a dictatorship. Still, I stayed calm. My paperwork was airtight, my boundaries well documented. But Karen wasn't interested in facts. She was interested in control, in escalation. And the day she truly crossed the line, the day she brought in a real construction crew to pave 10 feet of my driveway without permission, was the day this quiet suburban street turned into a battlefield. And if you've ever dealt with a neighbor who invents rules out of thin air, make sure you are subscribed. Stories like this get on real fast. Because when those machines started spreading hot asphalt across my property, and Karen declared it HOA approved, I realized I wasn't up against a difficult neighbor. I was up against a self-appointed queen who believed my land was hers to claim. The moment that asphalt crew rolled up, the entire neighborhood felt wrong, too quiet, too still, as if the world itself sensed something illegal about to unfold. I stepped onto my porch with my coffee and froze. A diesel engine idled at the end of my driveway. Men unloaded tools, hoses, and markers, the kind of gear you hire when you're paving a parking lot, not sharing a driveway. And in the middle of it all stood her pink blazer, sunglasses, clipboard. She looked like a project manager for a highway expansion, not someone altering land she didn't own. I stormed toward the crew. "What exactly are you doing?" I demanded. Karen turned with a bright smile, the kind you see on people who have completely lost touch with reality. "We're connecting the driveways," she said. "The HOA approved it." I took a breath so deep it nearly reached my shoes. "There is no HOA." She shrugged, like I'd mentioned the weather. "Well, the community agrees. And by community, I mean Richard and myself." The crew hesitated. Sensing conflict, I tried reasoning with them, showing documents, pointing out the property line. Karen stepped between us like she was breaking up a diplomatic summit. "Ignore him," she told the workers, voice firm. "This section belongs to us." Then this part I will never forget. She waved her iced latte at the asphalt. "Mix her like a queen, giving her troops the command to invade." The machines roared to life, and just like that, hot asphalt began pouring across 10 feet of my driveway. My property bearing the gravel I've driven on for nearly a decade. "You can't do this!" I shouted. Richard appeared on their porch, holding a coffee mug labeled Boss Man, smirking like he'd orchestrated a military victory. "Really improves traffic flow," he called it. My blood boiled so hot it felt radioactive. I ran back to my house, grabbed my deed, survey, platmapol. The paperwork that proved every inch of that driveway was mine, and marched back. Karen didn't even look at the documents. She didn't have to. In her mind, reality bent around whatever she declared. "My survey says otherwise," she said. "What survey?" "Richard measured it yesterday." I stared at her. "You mean he used a tape measure?" "A contractor-grade tape measure," she corrected, as if that made it legally binding. The workers kept paving. 10 minutes later, the section was done smooth, fresh, dark. Asphalt seamlessly fused into hers. It looked like one shared driveway. A driveway I never authorized. A driveway she now believed was hers. She wasn't finished. By evening, she'd installed decorative pathway lights along the stolen border, humming to herself while she tapped each solar stake into the edge of my land. Small river stones appeared next, then a potted topiary shaped like a corkscrew, her signature. It was like she was furnishing a stolen living room. The next morning, her SUV was parked sideways across the new section as if posing for a luxury car advertisement. All I could do was stand there in disbelief. When I confronted her, she didn't yell, didn't falter. She simply tilted her sunglasses down, eyes icy. "You're making this more difficult than it needs to be," she said. "Just adapt. It's a shared driveway now." She said it with such confidence that for a moment, a brief flicker, I understood how cult leaders are born. But any hope of reasoning with her died that night when she taped another ovulation notice to my door. The third one in 2 days. This time accusing me of improper parking on community land. Truly believe that if she said it enough times, it would become true. If you're still with me at this point, make sure you are subscribed. Wouldn't believe what some people are willing to do when they think rules don't apply to them, because her fake violations were nothing compared to what happened next. When Karen escalated from notes and decorations to hosting a full-blown dinner party on my driveway, and that's when the neighborhood turned against her. And my plan for revenge first sparked. By the end of that week, the stolen strip of driveway had become Karen's personal red carpet. She decorated it, parked on it, posed on it, and then, because the universe has a sense of humor, she decided it was the perfect venue for a dinner party. I came home after a long landscaping job, sunburned and exhausted, expecting a quiet night. Instead, my street looked like a festival had been dropped onto my property. Cars lined both sides of the road. People I'd never met carried wine bottles and cheese boards. Music thumped from the Henderson backyard. And worst of all, 5 vehicles were parked in the stolen section of my driveway. One minivan had backed in so recklessly a tire was sitting in my grass. When Karen spotted me, she lit up like a hostess greeting a VIP guest. "Oh good, you're home," she chirped. My sister and her husband needed a spot close to the door. I stared at her. In my driveway, she blinked, gestured around like the evidence was invisible. "It's a shared driveway." "It is not shared." Her smile grew sweeter, the kind of sweet that rots teeth. "Well," she said softly, "it is now I didn't trust myself to answer. I walked around the house, counting breaths, trying not to snap. But as I circled toward my backyard, I overheard her telling guests, "He's been very difficult about the transition, but we're being patient. Change is hard for some people. So may people, like I was a caveman struggling to evolve." A guest asked, "Is it really your driveway now?" Karen replied instantly, "Absolutely. We're formalizing an HOA next month. He'll have to comply." Complete, a word people usually use when talking about zoning laws, not basic property rights. By morning, the guests were gone, but the chaos remained. Tire tracks across my gravel, a crushed solar light, a dirty napkin blowing across the driveway, and a new note taped to my door. "Please avoid leaving work equipment in the driveway during visiting hours. It disrupts the aesthetic of the shared community space." I almost framed that one just for the comedy, but things shifted the next day. A printed violation, formatted like a real legal letter, was pinned to my mailbox. Bold logo, reference numbers, a fake hotline that turned out to be Karen's personal phone. 3 neighbors approached me when they saw it. She warned me for my garden hose. She cited me for having a birthday party for my... She told me my recycling bin was off theme, as if we lived in a resort, not a regular suburban street. That was the moment it clicked. I wasn't the only target. Karen wasn't just stealing land, she was staging a hostile HOA takeover of the entire block, a dictatorship built on paper notes and dilution. But no one wanted confrontation. People were busy, tired, not ready to battle a suburban tyrant. I, however, had reached my limit, and I had something Karen didn't: the legal right to every inch she'd invaded, and the patience to use that truth against her. That night, I sat on my back porch, staring at the stolen driveway, the ridiculous solar lights, the crooked topiary, the decorative stones, all sitting proudly on land that wasn't hers. Then an idea sparked. Small at first, 10 bigger, then brilliant. If Karen wanted to manage my land so badly, I'd give her something impossible to manage. Something inconvenient, heavy, undeniable land, completely legal. In fact, I'd give her 2 tons of something. No, 10 tons. I grabbed my phone and placed a call to a supplier I'd worked with for years. "Morning," the guy said. "What do you need?" I smiled. "A delivery. Something big. Drop it on the freshly paved section of my driveway." "On the pavement?" he asked. "Oh yes, right on it. If you're enjoying this insanity, and trust me, we're only getting warmed up, make sure you're subscribed so you never miss stories like this." Because 2 hours later, an enormous dump truck thundered onto my street, and when it tilted its bed and unleashed a actual Mountain 2 Karen's stolen asphalt, that was the moment the war truly began. 2 hours after I made the call, the street trembled under the weight of an enormous yellow dump truck. It rolled in like a steel titan, the kind of machine that announces trouble long before it arrives. Karen was outside watering her overpriced corkscrew topiary when she heard the rumbling. She turned, squinting, confused, and then horrified. The truck stopped directly in front of the new asphalt she'd stolen. The driver hopped out. "You Miller?" I nodded. "Where do you want it?" I pointed straight at the 10 feet of illegal paving. Karen dropped her watering can like she'd been shot. "What is happening?" she shrieked. "Storming toward us." "Delivery," I said. "For who?" she snapped. "For me. You can't dump anything on a shared driveway." She said it like she was reciting scripture. The driver raised an eyebrow. "Sir, this your land?" "Every inch, eh?" Shrugeth climbed back into the truck. Karen screamed, "Stop! Stop! Right nitrate monoxide! Tulat!" With a mechanical roar and a thunderous crash, the truck tilted its bed and unleashed a waterfall of rich brown mulched-in cubic yards of steaming, fragrant with gypsantu, the exact piece of asphalt Karen had stolen. The pile grew into a mountain, a glorious, towering monument of pure inconvenience. Karen staggered backward, hands on her head. "You're blocking our driveway!" "No," I corrected. "I'm using my driveway. Tis, ici, actually," I said calmly, "it's mulch. Very legal mulch." Richard stumbled outside in pajama pants. "You can't do this. We need that entrance." "You still have your own driveway?" I told him. "It's inconvenient from that angle." "That," I said, "sounds like a you problem." For the next 3 days, that mulch mountain sat there and bothered, unmovable, gloriously obstructive. Delivery drivers called Karen in confusion. Guests had to park down the street and walk. Karen, in a moment of desperation, tried shoveling the pile herself and quit after 10 exhausted minutes. Every time she looked at it, her eye twitched like she was trying to blink away a nightmare. But Karen doesn't retreat. She escalates. On day 2, she slapped a neon pink HOA emergency citation on my door. Offense: blocking a community passageway. Fine: $150. Payment instructions: cash-only place, under our doormat. I laughed until my sides hurt. On day 3, Richard approached me with forced calm, holding herbal tea like it was a peace treaty. "Let's be reasonable," he said. "I am," I replied. "We need that section accessible. You needed to not build on my land." He exhaled dramatically, as if I were the unreasonable one. "Fine. We'll handle this legally." "Oh," I said with a smile, "I'm counting on it." Because the mulch, that was just the appetizer. On day 4, I placed another call. Not for mulch this time, for 10 tons of gravel. If mulch was inconvenient, gravel was a fortress. Heavy, immovable. The kind of thing you need industrial equipment to clear. The dump truck arrived before noon. Bigger this time. "Lo there, glorios." Karen bolted outside in slippers, screaming like someone was stealing her Cadillac. "No, no. You cannot put that there." The driver didn't even respond. He had his instructions. "Same spot?" he asked. I nodded. "Right on top." Karen shook with rage. And then it happened. 10 tons of gravel cascaded onto the stolen driveway, burying it under a shimmering avalanche of stone. The sound echoed like justice. Karen shrieked. Richard yelled. The driver locked the gate and drove off. Minutes later, police arrived. Finally, Karen ran to them like a martyr returning from battle. "Officer, he's blocking our driveway." The officer reviewed my documents, surveyed the property line, studied the illegal fence. Then he turned to Karen and delivered the most beautiful sentence I'd heard all year. "Ma'am, this is clearly his property," Karen sputtered. But he's blocking our access." The officer shrugged. "Then you shouldn't have built on it." Or poetry. And if you're still following this chaos, make sure you resubscribe. The reality gets even stranger from here, because after the gravel came the moment that finally broke Karen. Not with force, not with shouting, but with one brilliant, perfectly legal delivery she never saw coming. A bright blue porta-potty placed dead center on my land. If the gravel buried Karen's confidence, the next move shattered it completely. BT's point. Karen wasn't just frustrated, she was unraveling. She paced the edges of the gravel mound like a guard dog circling a territory she couldn't control. She poked at the stones with a broom handle. She took photos. She muttered dramatic monologues under her breath, like she was narrating a true crime documentary titled "The Day My Neighbor Snapped." She even printed a crooked sign that read, "HOA Enforcement Area. No dumping." It looked like it belonged in a haunted carnival. But the breaking point came the following afternoon. I made one more call. Just one. Short, simple, beautiful. By noon the next day, a box truck pulled up, carrying the most magnificent instrument of suburban warfare ever invented, a bright electric blue porta-potty. Brand new, freshly sanitized, unavoidably hideous. The driver stepped out, glanced at the gravel pile, the illegal fence, the solar lights, the chaos, and said, "Man, what happened here?" "Long story," I replied. Put it right there. I pointed to the exact center of my property line, strategically placed where Karen had stolen, decorated, and paved. Karen came sprinting out of her house, like a seagull charging at someone holding a French fry. No. No. Absolutely not. You can't put that there. The driver blinked. It's his land, ma'am. It's a shared driveway, she screeched. It's not shared, I corrected. And I need this for my work crew next week. The driver shrugged, lowered the porta-potty, locked it in place, and climbed back into his truck. The moment he drove off, Karen let out a scream that sounded like a tea kettle exploding. What is wrong with you? She demanded. Property usage, I said. You've been lecturing me about that for weeks. This is a toilet, she shrieked. Yes, I said. And it's staying. Neighbors came outside. Kids on bikes slowed to stare. One elderly couple whispered, Is that her new office? Karen's face twisted into a level of mortification that could power a small town. That evening, the neighborhood bestowed a name upon it, Karen's Throne. By sunset, the name spread house to house, like wildfire. Teenagers posed in front of it for a paper crown appeared taped to the top. Someone slid a reserved sign under the door. Karen tore the crown off and screamed, Who did this? Spoiler, nobody confessed. She blamed me, naturally. You're encouraging them, she shouted at my porch. I'm not doing anything, I answered. I'm just enjoying the peace. Peace. How can anyone live like this? I gestured at the throne. Comfortably, she stomped away, shaken, but her humiliation wasn't complete. No, Karen still had one more disastrous tactic left in her arsenal. Recruitment, door after door, she knocked binder in hand, sunglasses trembling, delivering the same speech. Our community is under threat. Standards are collapsing. We need order. We need leadership. We need me. One neighbor closed the door in her face. Another said, Lady, we moved here to avoid an H. Her shoulders sagged lower each time. Even UBs delivered their own plot twist. She tried to scold the driver for parking on the street. Replied, Ma'am, I deliver to 200 neighborhoods a week. I promise you don't have an HOA. Even he walked away, shaking his head. That moment spread through the neighborhood like a meme. By now, Karen was cracking. Her hair frizzed. Her slogans contradicted themselves. Her topiary leaned to one side like it was ashamed to stand upright. And then the final blow arrived. A thick envelope in my mailbox. Stamped, urgent, legal action. She sued me for emotional distress, for aggressive landscaping, for visual pollution, and my personal favorite, for intent to provoke rebellion within the community. I laughed so hard I nearly choked. My attorney laughed harder, so I filed a counterclaim. Aril won. When Karen received it, she screamed so loudly birds launched from trees. Richard whispered, This is consequence. Finally, someone said it. And if you're still with me through this storm of insanity, hit subscribe, because what happens in the courthouse next is something you have to hear to believe. Because when we finally stood before the Judge Karen, clutching her glittery binders, me holding actual legal documents, the truth didn't just come out. It exploded, and her imaginary HOA collapsed in the most spectacular way imaginable. Courtrooms have a special kind of quiet, the kind where even the air feels like it's waiting for someone to embarrass themselves. And on our hearing day, Karen looked ready to deliver a masterclass in exactly that. She walked in clutching a bulging manila folder like it contained the Constitution. Richard followed with a glitter-covered binder labeled HOA Files Confidential. It would have been intimidating if it didn't look like a middle school science project. My attorney, Lillian, carried a single, neat binder of actual evidence. Real surveys, official maps, county records, Karen's natural enemy. As soon as we sat down in the hallway, Karen approached with the fakest smile ever worn by a human being. I'd like to resolve this without public conflict, she whispered, as if she were doing me a favor. You mean avoid being embarrassed in front of a judge? Primera asked. Setwichet, we're willing to remove part of the fence if you relocate that hideous structure and... No. Her jaw flexed. She spun away stiffly, heels clicking like angry metronomes. When the bailiff called our case, 6 neighbors slipped quietly into the gallery. Mrs. Turner brought popcorn like it was opening night. We all stood as the judge entered, a tall, silver-haired man radiating the exhausted energy of someone who has met too many Karens in his career. He barely sat before Karen raised her hand to speak. "Ma'am," the judge said without looking up, "you will speak only when addressed." Her arm dropped like dead weight. The clerk read the case names. Henderson versus Miller, and Miller versus Henderson. The judge sighed. This should be interesting. Karen stood when invited. "Your Honor," she began smoothly, "we have endured harassment, obstruction, emotional distress, and egregious violations of NEA. There is no HOA registered for your neighborhood," the judge cut in. Karen blinked rapidly. "We are in the process of forming one. That gives you no legal authority." A sighed flatly. A crack formed in her confidence. She tried again. "We believed the driveway was shared." "What reason did you have to believe that?" Richard jumped up. "We measured it." The judge stared. "You used what exactly?" "A contractor-grade tape measure," he said proudly. You could feel the courtroom struggling not to laugh. The judge turned to my attorney. "Mr. Miller's deed and survey." Lillian handed him the documents. "Stamped, certified, unquestionable." He skimmed them, nodded, and looked up. "Senora Henderson, the disputed section belongs entirely to Mr. Miller." Karen's mouth fell open. "That can't be correct." "It is," he repeated. "But we built improvements on someone else's land," the judge said, "which is illegal." Karen made a strangled sound like an accordion collapsing. Then came the knockout. The judge asked, "Did you hire a licensed surveyor?" She froze. "We performed an estimate." "Bring the paving contractor forward," he ordered. Karen panicked. "Your Honor, he isn't But the contractor entered, removed his cap, and answered plainly. "They told me they owned it. No permits. Paid cash." Karen gasped. "You weren't supposed to say that." "I'm under oath," he replied. The judge rubbed his forehead like he felt a migraine being born. His ruling was swift. "The court finds in favor of Mr. Miller." Karen staggered like she'd been hit with a tranquilizer dart. "You will remove all fencing, asphalt, lighting, and installations from his property, restore the land to its original state, and pay his legal fees." Richard sat down so hard his binder nearly exploded. "And," the judge added sharply, "cease issuing any notices or communications under the title of HOA. Any further attempts will result in fines." Karen collapsed into her chair, silent for the first time since moving in. When we walked out, I passed her in the hallway. She looked shattered, defeated. I said quietly, "Next time, measure twice before stealing." Her face twitched. She said nothing. Back home, the demolition began immediately. Asphalt, fence torn down. Lights pulled up. Her fake empire disassembled piece by piece. Neighbors watched from porches, like it was a holiday parade. 3 days later, my real driveway, was fully restored. Karen approached me once more at sunset. "We're selling the house?" she whispered. I nodded. "It's probably best." She looked down. "This neighborhood isn't what we expected." I almost laughed at the understatement of the century, but I let her walk away with whatever dignity she had left. 2 months later, the Hendersons drove off for the last time. No notes, no clipboard, no imaginary yaw. Peace settled over the street like a long-awaited summer breeze. Dogs barked freely again. Kids played. Upstrivers parked wherever they wanted. I finally enjoyed my driveway in silence. If you enjoyed this unbelievable journey, make sure you're subscribe it. Real stories like this happen more often than you'd think, and trust me, you don't want to miss the next one.